Somewhere in China in the early 1980s, a military officer finds himself in a packed auditorium with 1,000 other military personnel. All he knows is he's been asked to attend a demonstration of superhuman power. He and the rest of the audience have been given a flower bud, which they hold in their hands. A silence falls over the audience as a young girl walks onto the middle of the stage. She looks at the expressions before her, then, waving her hand, causes every single flower bud to open, to the stunned amazement of all. Later on, this military officer learns this girl is just one of thousands of psychically gifted children who defy the laws of physics, and that a plan is underway to harness these powers. Powers like those belonging to Yao Jung, a teenager around whom objects would spontaneously burst into flames or float around the room, and who could produce writing on walls merely by imagining such words in her mind. Or the two sisters, Wang Qiang and Wang Bin, who shared such a strong telepathic connection, one could describe what the other was looking at, even from across great distances. Now, given the profound abilities of these children, why do so few of us know about them?
The CIA certainly knew, as declassified files show their very active interest in what the Chinese were doing. And it's little wonder why. The CIA was very invested in Project Stargate, whereby servicemen and women learnt remote viewing to enable them to retrieve information across vast distances about foreign powers' technology and strategies. And it must have been interesting for them to see what their Chinese counterparts were up to, the age of the children involved, and the extent of their abilities. Just what type of threat would these children become to China's enemies? The Psychic Children program would soon go dark as its potential became fully realised. Here's what's known. In 1977, Chinese officials became aware of the existence of young children doing extraordinary things. Super Psychic Child number 1 was 11-year-old Tang Yu from Sichuan province, who discovered he could read letters written on objects his eyes had never seen. Exploring his new talent, Tang began playing guessing games with the people in his village. He'd get them to write random characters on bits of paper that he couldn't see, and then scrunch those up and place the paper next to his ear. Tang would then correctly guess what was written on the paper. His fame spread, and soon the Chinese Science Commission came to visit Tang to examine his abilities. They'd confirm that he could identify words and colours on paper held to his ear. Newspapers published these results, and shortly after, 10 more children were identified with the same strange ability, known as non-ocular vision, or reading with the ear. Soon parents and teachers all over China were testing their children for this ability. When a child with potential was identified, the government would send officials to examine their talents and explore what other things they could do. Moving objects with the mind was the next step in identifying these children's psychic potential. Sealed bottles of pills were placed in front of the child, and the child was then asked to remove the pills from the bottle without disturbing the bottle's seal. And a shockingly high number of children actually achieved this. Psychic functioning service people could give a country an advantage in espionage, politics, and warfare. So high-ranking officials made it their mission to find the best of these psychic prodigies. Could their abilities be trained and strengthened? And if so, how could China deploy these powers? During this project's early stages, from between 1979 to 1982, here are some of the abilities that were identified. Moving objects with the mind, seeing through human bodies and boxes like an X-ray, performing long mental arithmetic faster than a calculator, seeing through walls, opening locks by mind power, and making flowers bloom with the mind. It was estimated that between 2,000 and 3,000 Chinese children had high-functioning psychic abilities in the early 1980s. These kids would now be in their 50s, many of them well trained to master their abilities. So who did these children become, and where would they be today? Precisely how many psychic children became active super psychics is a well-guarded secret, but before things went dark, observations were published, and these hold clues. Psychic ability appears more prevalent in populations that are poorer and less technological. Researchers suspect this is because hunger and the potential for danger activates intuitive senses. Healing effects were reported by people who have observed controlled demonstrations of psychic power. Yao Jung became famous for this. She would demonstrate her abilities, which would generate a golden aura of light above her. Some of these psychic children reported sensing the presence of powerful invisible beings who seemed to guide them to better access, understand, and use their strange abilities. Just who these beings were was never well understood by either the children or the researchers testing them, However, some think it may have something to do with this.
At the inception of this initiative, powerful adult psychics already held high positions within the Chinese ruling structure. The most powerful psychic in China was a mysterious woman whose personal details were kept top secret, but who was said to possess powers that would rival the gods of Chinese mythology. Such a person, we must assume, will have had a guiding influence in training these children to master their abilities.
Therefore, many of these psychic children will now be highly trained super psychic adults serving their country in a very unique capacity.
So, where are they now? We know through declassified files that the Americans and Russians were heavily invested in remote viewing. We should assume psychic children have been trained in this discipline and actively practice this today. 2. Some psychic children demonstrated profound abilities to see inside the human body and diagnose problems. Some of these children will be working in health industries. 3. The ability to sense truth and deception while psychically influencing others gives reason to believe some of these prodigies would now work in the diplomatic field, attached to certain places where high-powered meetings take place. And this brings me to off-world communications. Since the 70s, psychics and remote viewers have revealed close encounter experiences of the fifth kind. Ingo Swann was a famous example, claiming his abilities made him both the target of extraterrestrial contact and able to identify human-like people who were certainly not human. There seems to be a connection between enhanced psychic functioning and folks not from round this way. Also, whistleblowers have come forth to claim our governments have made contact with non-human intelligence, and that psychically gifted empaths act as ambassadors to communicate with such beings.
Could this be true? I don't know, but if it was, China, a large player in space, would certainly be active in this domain.
What about the kids of today? Is China still recruiting and training young psychic children? It's suspected so. One researcher estimates the likely number of Chinese super psychics to be close to 100,000.
But that's just an educated guess. All we know for sure is they're out there, somewhere. All likes and comments help my channel grow and are greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching.